Hi, let's learn Star Wars The Clone Wars, a 1 to 5 player game by Alexander Ortloff, published by Z-Man Games. And note that although this game uses the pandemic system, it will be taught as an independent experience. Star Wars The Clone Wars is a cooperative game, so everyone is on the same team. The goal of the game is to complete all the missions of the mission deck, and then the finale on the back of the villain sheet. Once those tasks are completed, everybody wins. But all players will lose if the threat marker reaches the final space. To set up, let's start by placing the game board on the table. The game comes with 2 markers. Let's take those and place one on the 0 location of the threat track and the other at the first 2 of the invasion track. The Jedi must defend the Republic from 3 types of enemies: battle droids, blockades, and villains. Droids accumulate on planets, and blockades prevent Jedi from attacking droids and villains, as well as preventing them from attempting missions until they themselves are destroyed. Villains, meanwhile, only prevent Jedi from attempting missions. Each game, you will face off against one villain. Each villain has a sheet that shows their health and any special abilities they have, and the backside shows the rules for the finale and how to eventually win the game. The game comes with 4 villains. For our first game, let's choose Asajj Ventress, and we'll place the other 3 back in the box. We'll place the villain with its non-finale side up in the villain sheet location above the board. Each villain also has a deck of cards that defines how the villain acts during the game. Find your villain's corresponding villain deck and place that face down in the villain deck spot above the board by the villain sheet. 3 of the 4 villains have this exclamation mark as a part of its villain sheet. If the villain you have chosen has one of these marks, you would now take the matching token and place it on the villain deck. These villains have effects that occur every turn. The marker will serve to remind you to perform this action before drawing a villain card. If the villain has any setup instructions, now would be the time to perform them. Next, find the 2 mission planet cards and place them face up to begin the invasion discard pile. Next, take the remainder of the invasion deck, shuffle it, and place it in the indicated invasion deck location. Then draw 2 of those cards and place 3 droids on each corresponding planet. Those cards will go in the discard pile and draw 2 more cards. Place 2 droids on each of those planets. Those cards go in the discard pile and draw 2 more cards. Place 1 droid on each of those planets and place the villain miniature on the planet of the last drawn card. Then discard those cards as well. Next, take the reference cards, whose only difference is which starting planet is on it, shuffle it, and deal 1 out to each player. Let's set up a 3-player game. Players take on the roles of Jedi battling the forces of the Separatist droid army. Each Jedi has a card showing their unique ability and is represented on the board by a miniature. Each player chooses their character. So take the character card and corresponding miniature, and everybody places their figure on their own corresponding planet. Return all unused components back to the box, including the solo marker, which is used to keep track of which of the 2 Jedi the solo player is currently playing as. In the future, you will see cards that refer to your planet. This is simply referring to the planet you are on, not the one you start on. So right now this is your planet. When you move to Tatooine, this one is your planet. Next, take the squad deck, shuffle it, then deal out to each player. 3 cards for a 2 or 3 player game, or if you are playing a 4 or 5 player game, each player would get 4 cards. And place the remainder of the squad deck by the indicated squad deck section of the board. Next, we'll take the deck of mission cards and we'll randomly choose an amount depending on how difficult of a game we wish to have. you must have at least 3 mission cards, but if you wish to have more of a challenge, you can keep adding in more and more cards. Then we'll take the cards we have chosen and place that in the mission deck location by the board. Then take the top card and place it face up in the orange section underneath. Then we'll take the orange marker and place it on the matching planet. And if the card had any when drawn effects, we would resolve that right now. Then do the same thing for the second card, but put it in the white section. Then take the white marker and place that on the matching planet. The planets with the markers will be referred to as mission planets. First player is determined by whoever has the high ground. That person then takes the die to start their turn. On their turn, players will do these 4 steps in this order: ready cards, do 4 actions, activate villain, and invade planets. Throughout the game, players will gain squad cards to their hand, up to a maximum of 7 cards. As this is a cooperative game, keep all 7 cards face up in front of you. At the start of your turn, unexhaust any used squad cards, and they are now ready to be used again. During your turn, you can do up to 4 actions, including repeating an action you've already taken. And you may do them in any order you wish. You can fly, reinforce, attack, attempt mission, as well as 2 bonus actions, which include perform your Jedi special ability and use your squad card abilities. Let's go into detail about using each of these right now. To fly means to move your Jedi to a connected planet. So Ahsoka could not move from Naboo to Tatooine, but could move to Rhodia because it is connected. And enemies do not affect Jedi movement. The next option you may choose is Reinforce, which is to draw 1 card from the squad deck. Even if you already had your hand limit of 7 cards, you may still draw a card from the squad deck. You would then need to either play an ally card or discard another card to get your hand limit back to 7 cards. And if you ever want to take a card from the squad deck, but there are no cards, take the squad discard pile, shuffle it to create a new squad deck, and draw from that. If there are enemies on the planet you are on, you can attack. Besides nothing happening, the die has 2 different symbols: success and damage. A success refers to how many hit points it is able to deal out to the enemy. In the case of a battle droid, it requires 1 hit point to remove it from the board. A blockade requires 2 hit points to be removed from the board. And before the finale, you can remove a villain from the board by getting the amount of successes required by the non-finale side of their sheet. Also, damage is not accumulated. So if you are unable to defeat a villain now, you must make another attempt to gain the full amount. Once you have gone through your successes, it is possible for you to take damage. So for every enemy remaining on the planet, as well as damage you may have rolled on the die, you must discard 1 card per damage. So in our example, we would have to discard 4 cards. If you ever suffer damage, but you have no cards to discard, you suffer no effect. Each player has a hand of squad cards representing characters and vehicles that can help them in their fight. There are 5 different types of squad cards: assault, stealth, armor, and transport, as well as ally cards, which have a more powerful ability. And using squad cards does not count as an action. They are simply added on to whatever it is you are currently doing. Assault and stealth cards can add success to an attack on your planet. When adding successes to a die roll, you may only use 1 type of the stealth or assault card. So you could not combine 1 assault and 1 stealth. You would instead have to use the 2 stealth. When any Jedi on your planet suffers damage, you can use any number of armor cards to prevent 1 damage per card. When any Jedi on your planet flies, you can use a transport card to allow that Jedi to move twice during that flight. But only 1 transport card can be used to extend each flight. To use one of these regular cards, we exhaust it by turning it sideways. Once a card is exhausted, it cannot be used until it has been unexhausted at the start of your next turn. Unlike other squad cards, you must discard an ally card to use its effect. And being ally cards, you are also able to use them during other players' turns. The C-3PO and R2-D2 card can only be played on a mission planet, whether attacking on that planet or attempting a mission, and the Bad Batch can be played anytime. Each Jedi card also has a special ability. These special abilities are free actions. So although you can only do it once per turn, it does not count towards your 4 actions. You are also able to use your free action during another player's turn if it has not already been exhausted. You cannot do a free action in the middle of another action or during another player's turn. So of the actions that count towards your 4 actions, you can fly, reinforce, attack, and finally attempt mission, which can be simultaneously undertaken by all Jedi who happen to be on the mission planet. Let's take a look at the mission we are currently undertaking. As established, there is a hostage crisis on Coruscant. And reading from right to left, we can see the consequence of a successful mission, the total number of successes we need to attain in order to complete the mission, and finally, the types of cards that we are allowed to exhaust to add successes to the mission. And you can only attempt a mission if it does not have a blockade or villain in it. Unless you are in the finale, then that restriction no longer applies. When you are on a mission planet, first roll the die. So in our example, we rolled 2 successes and 1 damage. And as established, to have a successful mission, we need to have 6 successes. So now both Anakin and Yoda players are able to exhaust a combined 4 stealth cards. And just like attacks, to complete a mission successfully, you must have the total combined number this turn. It is not tracked into next turn. If the Jedi on the mission planet are able to have a successful mission, the player whose turn it currently is suffers the damage of the die and mission by discarding that amount of squad cards from their hand. If the card has a when completed effect, complete the effect, if applicable, and return the card to the box. Then, if there are any cards left in the mission deck, flip the top card over and place it in the now empty mission spot. Place the mission marker on the new planet, and if the card you drew has a when drawn effect, resolve that effect. If you complete a mission and there are no cards in the mission deck, take the mission marker from that planet and place it on the planet with the still active marker. And if all missions are completed, we enter the finale, which I will get to in a bit. However, if the mission was unsuccessful, the current player would only take damage of the die. The damage indicated on the mission card is only for a successful mission. And of course, the mission card remains to be attempted again at a later turn. When one Jedi has completed their actions, it then becomes the villain's turn. And remember, some villains have effects that happen every turn. If you are playing against one of those villains, now is the time to resolve this effect. Whether an effect needed to be resolved or not, now is the time when you would draw the top card of the villain deck and resolve its effect. After resolving its effect, place that card in the villain discard pile. If it ever came time to draw a card from the villain deck, but there were none, take the villain discard, shuffle it, and place it in the villain deck, then draw the top card of that. Every villain deck contains one Planet Under Siege card. When you draw one of these cards, first advance the invasion marker one space to the right. If the invasion marker is already furthest right, move the threat marker one space instead. Next, draw the bottom card of the invasion deck, then add droids to that planet until there are 3 in total. Finally, place that card in the discard pile, take whatever the discard pile is, shuffle that together, and place that on top of the invasion deck. Some cards refer to the top card planet. The top card it is referring to is the top card of the invasion discard, whether it's a named planet or whatever the mission planet happens to be. You'll see that sometimes after reading a card, there could be possible outcomes. In that case, the villain would take the shortest route. However, if there are 2 valid options, the current player is the one who chooses which direction the villain will take. If the effect of a villain card or sheet could have multiple possible outcomes, the current player chooses which effect to take. Once the villain has taken their turn, it is now time to invade planets. To do that, flip over the amount of cards indicated by the invasion marker of the invasion deck. Place 1 droid on each of those planets and discard the invasion cards. And note that planets can only have 3 battle droids on it at a time. So if you would need to place a 4th droid on a planet, do not do that, and instead an occupation occurs. And resolving an occupation requires 2 steps. Advance the threat marker 1 space, and place 1 blockade on that planet. And it is possible for multiple blockades to end up on the same planet. And although Jedi can go onto that planet, they cannot affect missions, droids, or villains in any way until all blockades have been removed from the planet first. And remember, 1 blockade is removed by suffering 2 damage. And if, when removing a blockade, you were to have more than the damage necessary, only when all the blockades were removed could you use excess damage to then hit another enemy target on the board. If you need to place a blockade, but they're all on the board, advance the threat marker 1 space per blockade that you are unable to place. Do the same thing with droids. So threat is advanced instead of placing a 4th droid on a planet. If you ever needed to place a blockade or droid and there are none, if you need to advance the invasion marker but there are no more spaces for it to move, and some villains can affect the threat marker. When one player has finished their 4 steps of ready cards, do 4 actions, activate villain, and invade planets, play then passes clockwise to the next player and continues on so forth until you reach the finale. As previously said, if the final mission has been completed, we enter the finale. To set up the finale, flip over the villain sheet and complete any finale setup required. And now for the rest of the game, only the finale side applies. Each villain sheet will say what is needed to complete the finale and win the game. And during the finale, you can attempt missions on a planet with villains and blockades. For Ventress, Dogfight is a mission, so an attempt mission action must be used to do it. For General Grievous, set the slider aside. It won't be used until the finale. Infiltrate, Confront, Chase, and Destroy are missions and must be completed in order using the attempt mission action. When you complete a mission, advance the slider down to the next mission. For his Make Them Suffer card, if the damage is blocked, the Jedi can still move. When Maul gains power, move the slider up that many spaces. If Maul were to gain or lose more than what the card says, the remaining movement is lost. And for hostile takeover, place Maul on the top planet whether he had been removed or not. When Maul's villain sheet is flipped, keep the slider in its position. Showdown is a mission and must be completed using the attempted mission action. The number you need to reach to complete the mission is 7 plus whatever the value is on the threat track. With Count Dooku, before the finale, each villain has 2 health. During the finale, Dooku has 5 health and Grievous has 2 health, and Ventress would be returned to the box. For Dooku's duel card, if one Jedi is on a planet with multiple villains, they suffer only 1 damage. If you flip over Puppet Master during the finale, remember Ventress is not on the board during the finale. Before we go, let's just go over a couple notes. For these cards, the movement is not flight, and so they are unaffected by transport cards. For Ahsoka, if you exhaust 2 cards, the damage can be dealt on a single planet or divided among 2 different planets. And this can remove a blockade. With Anakin, this is the only time you can exhaust both Assault and Stealth while attacking. For Mace Windu, the only time you cannot do his action is if the planet has a blockade. And for Obi-Wan and Luminara, discard to your hand limit only after fully resolving their ability. And that's all you need to know to get started playing Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Have fun! And I invite you to join me next time as I do a playthrough.